Go. I hate that this. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, we are live. That didn't take as long as I thought. And I am joined by Jay Unwin. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Kelly. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
I'm very well. Thank you for booking a slot. I'm very excited to see where this conversation goes. I think Jay and I have just very, very briefly spoken behind the scenes, and we are, I think, both convinced that this conversation could go off on any number of tangents. But hopefully it will still be very useful for you as part of day 2 of the This Is Burnout campaign. So, Jay, before we get into talking about burnout or wherever else the conversation may take us, just give us a little bit about you. So kind of who are you? What do you do?
So, trim that down into a tiny little manageable bite-sized piece. I've worked in the fitness industry for about a decade now, just over a decade. And the reason I came into the fitness industry is because prior to that, I was a science teacher, and I burned out quite catastrophically, which is why, one of the reasons I'm here to chat. I went into the fitness industry because I thought, hey, I need to be doing a career that keeps me fit and well rather than making me unwell. And what better industry? What's in a name? Health and fitness. Perfect. Turns out I was completely wrong. And 5 years later, I burned out again. Now, I would say that being able to stay well for those 5 years was definitely worth doing. But I hadn't really changed anything internally. I'd changed my environment, which was absolutely vital. But I'd, to all intents and purposes, gone from being a workaholic teacher to being a workaholic personal trainer. Self-employment is not, let's say, the best environment for someone with a heavy dose of perfectionism. When I was a teacher, I was constantly trying to do everything better. There was always more work that could be done. There was always more marking. I could always plan stuff better. And then when you're self-employed as a personal trainer, it was exactly the same. So after that second burnout, I was unable to work for 6 months. And during that time, I kind of developed a philosophy and a set of strategies which kind of married the physical well-being and the mental well-being. And that was just for me at the time. That was just to build myself back up, rebuild myself mentally and physically. When I was able to work again, I realized I'm not the only person who struggles with this stuff, with stress management, with burnout, and so on and so forth. And I thought, okay, hang on, the strategies that I've put together here and the philosophy that I've put together could be the basis of my coaching going forward. And so alongside that, I was kind of doing a lot of odd jobs here and there, did delivery driving. I worked in a pub, just like different bits and pieces, because I was rebuilding from scratch, right? And business doesn't appear overnight. While I was doing that, I was trying to offer coaching, because obviously that was my background, around fitness and well-being, but with this new philosophy. Problem is, everyone just wants a workout program and a diet plan and stuff like that. They didn't really get what I was trying to sell. And so it was very difficult to build a client base with this, because it didn't make a lot of sense to people. I wasn't selling them what they wanted. It may have been what they needed, but it wasn't what they wanted. So it was a hard slog, and it didn't really go where I wanted it to. And then a few years ago, this thing happened, which I don't know whether anyone remembers, but it was COVID.
Really? Was that big?
Knocking about. Yeah, it was quite under the radar. Not everyone realised what was going on. And the job that I was in at the time disappeared because I was working in a gym. The gym closed. There was no furlough or anything because I was self-employed still at this point. And I'd been toying with the idea of doing more corporate work and doing more speaking, because I love it. I absolutely love getting up in front of people and sharing an idea which really sets a light bulb off above people's heads. And I thought, if something as crazy on perhaps the negative side of things, something as crazy as COVID can happen and just completely blindside everyone, then maybe something as crazy on the positive side as me being able to make a living doing the kind of speaking side of things was possible as well. And so I thought, screw it. Got a clean slate now anyway. Everything's gone to shit. Sorry if I can't swear on this.
Go for it. Unless LinkedIn are going to ban us, but YouTube and Facebook seem to be loving it.
Cool. It was. I just thought, what the hell? And I decided to position myself more as delivering to groups of people, because although with coaching you can get the depth of impact, with speaking and workshops and so on, you can get the breadth of impact. And because what I'm trying to teach is very much that initial stage, that initial empowerment, the awareness that actually I can change something, the details of what changes people make is the depth stuff, and that's very personal. Still do a bit of coaching, but that's not my bag. I want to get people to the point where they realize they can make changes.
Yeah.
And so for me, the speaking side of things, going into an organization, meeting people where they're at, I want a room full of crossed arms, people who they have no interest in fitness, no interest in well-being at all. And they sit there going, yeah, I've heard it all before. It's a load of rubbish. And you don't get those people approaching you as a coach, right? So I want to go into organizations where they're filled with people like that and make them sit up and uncross their arms and realize that actually fitness and well-being is about adding value to their life, not another chore that they have to they have to do, but actually this stuff is going to improve their quality of life. And yes, it will reduce the chances of burnout and stuff like that further down the road, but really it's more positive than that. It's about adding value. It's about building your fitness so that you can spend it on things which are important to you, and that varies from person to person. You asked a very simple question, I gave a very long answer. Apologies.
I love it. No, I love it. And I think it shows the journey. And I think, when you're saying, people start folding crossed arms, like you're going to be the busiest person in the world this year, probably, if you're looking for people that sit crossed arms in meetings and people that talk about, say this stuff is important. That's my standing desk collapsing, so I didn't put it down properly. I think all of that's important, but I do think it shows the journey. And actually, Michelle Yeoman and I, as we were talking yesterday, like she came out of corporate. I'm interested to talk to you about the kind of education piece, actually, because I get lots of messages from people that have either left education or are struggling in education. So I'll be really interested in talking about that piece. But I think we were also talking about, if there is this kind of, this behavior type, if you are already an overperforming, high achieving perfectionist, leaving corporate is not going to get you to prevent burnout, right? And I burnt out in corporate, and I burnt out 18 months into my own business. Some of that was around some of the toxic people that had ended up kind of in my corporate life and in my business, or in a client that I was working with. But those perfectionist, high performing, overachieving, I've got to do everything to the very best of my ability. I've got to keep pushing. I've got to keep delivering. I've got to do all this stuff. I think lots of us can absolutely relate to. And again, COVID, I think for a lot of people really did cause us to say, like, what can I do, right? What is possible? What's not possible? What am I prepared to put up with, and what am I not? And I think if you were able to use that as a catapult to now do what you're doing, and clearly, you're loving it. And, and I know whenever I kind of see anything on LinkedIn, you're in another business, you're on another stage, you're, kind of doing all this stuff. So clearly it's worked for you. And perhaps without the burnout and without COVID, you might still be doing your, one-to-one personal training, right?
Yeah. I'm always trying to be careful about, I guess, glossing over genuine challenges and adversity and stuff like that, because I'm very much one who after the fact, you can reframe things and go, okay, what was the benefit? What came out of this? And there's always something. I don't like saying, we should be grateful for everything and stuff like that, because there's some people going through some horrible stuff in the world.
Yeah.
And to deny that or to minimize that, I think it's not a cool thing to do.
No.
And so it's not as simple as going, hey, you know what you're going through right now? Actually, it's going to make you stronger, because it doesn't always, right? The kind of mental, emotional adversities that people are facing, the psychological strain that some people are facing in life is, that old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yes, sometimes that's the case, but other times it causes you a lifelong injury, whether that's physical or mental, right?
Yeah.
So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Okay, say you fall from a great height and you survive, but you've broken your spine in 4 places and you never walk again. Does it make you stronger? Maybe in some ways. Does it make you? Is there knock-on negative impact of that? Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's going to be a serious challenge ongoing from that trauma, right? That physical trauma. and obviously the mental stuff that goes along with it, the psychological stuff that goes along with it. And so to be glib about mental and emotional challenges and say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, not always. And I think we have to be realistic about this. Sometimes without the right support and help, you're not going to, if you, to use the same analogy of someone, breaking their spine in 4 places, they need a lot of support from professionals to get back to a place where they're able to do certain things. If they were just left to their own devices, just go home and rest, have some time off, things aren't going to go well. There's going to be surgeries needed. There's going to be all kinds of rehabilitation work, and sometimes the same can be true of a kind of psychological burnout, because that's essentially what burnout is. It's a severe psychological injury. And so without the correct support from professionals and from people around you, you might not come back stronger. And so I think that we have to be very, very careful about this. However, that being said, there is this concept of post-traumatic growth, and this is a well-documented thing. And yes, there are other post-traumatic kind of things that we hear about. Post-traumatic stress disorder, we hear about that a lot. And people suffering with PTSD are going to, that is going to potentially be, or living with PTSD. Some people will suffer, some people will manage it. It's various different levels with different people. But there is this thing of post-traumatic growth. And so if the adversity is manageable, and if the recovery is managed well, then yes, that can lead to growth and development. And I think I've been lucky in the sense that the kind of trauma, it's a word that's overused, so I'll maybe try not to use it too much, but the adversity, the challenge of COVID from a financial perspective, because it ruined me and my family financially. Not as bad as other people have. We had some safety nets, which was very lucky. But I've seen people absolutely, they were losing businesses which they poured years and life savings into, and it was all gone in an instant. So the kind of the challenges that I'd faced with it, and yes, it was challenging, but like you said, in the end, it led to things which were positive. There has been post-traumatic growth there. And it's hard to see in the moment. And there'll be people who watch this, and there'll be people out there who are facing tremendous adversity at the moment in work, relationships, home life, finances, whatever. And it's very hard to see in the moment of going, okay, this might lead somewhere sunnier.
And I think when you're in it, it really is impossible to see that. And I think when people are underplaying it, or kind of, well, just you'll be fine, or just think of what will happen afterwards, or look at it as a growth moment, any of those sorts of things, that can absolutely, you don't see it in the moment. And when I was in burnout, as I'm sure where you were, and you'd mentioned kind of twice going through it, and then obviously business or work stopping completely during 2020. They are difficult times. You cannot always see your way out of it. And I think also, like, sometimes we don't also know that we're in it until we come through the other side as well. I don't know if you experience that with burnout, but I know, from my perspective and with a lot of my clients, it's like I didn't know I was at the point of burnout until I was starting to come through it. And I also think, in terms of what you were saying about the stuff that can happen afterwards, my TEDx talk was really based on a comment that I'd received from somebody. So I received a DM on LinkedIn in like August, basically telling me that I should be really grateful for the fact that I burned out, because clearly I'd got a lot of success over it, and that I should be really grateful for it. And I was like, I'd gone back to this guy, like you need to understand the nuances and the detail of everything that happened, because actually, if I could not have gone through it, I would still choose not to have gone through it. I live with bipolar now as a result of it, because of the mental issues that I have with it. I'm living with two physical issues that are, I have to manage them on a daily basis. So if it's like, would I choose, the greatness of burnout and all of the business success that it's given me since then, living with the health conditions that I've got, or would I choose to not burn out and have continued, and maybe taken my career in a different path anyway? I would choose to not burn out every single time, because living with what I now have to live with, I wouldn't wish on anybody. But this guy was literally like, well, you should be grateful for it, right? You should be grateful for the business and the opportunities and everything that's given you. I'm not ungrateful with my life, but I'm also like, if I could choose burnout or not, I'd be picking not burnout every single time.
It's an interesting one with that, because I think that this idea of gratitude can be like anything when taken too far. There's this saying in I guess it's probably chemistry and biology more than anything else, which is the dose makes the poison, right? So when you're looking at every substance has something called an LD50, which is the amount or the concentration at which something kills 50% of test subjects. So every substance has this LD50. It's also the name of a great album by a metal band called Mudvayne, from like about
Not
2000.
what I've heard, okay.
Yeah, so just if anyone wants some good kind of, it's really good, but it's called LD50. Anyway,
Okay.
that the idea is that if you administered that dosage to 100 test subjects, 50 of them would die, and that's why it's called LD50, right? Every substance has one. Water has one, right? Like something as harmless in terms of toxicity that we think water's not toxic, right? You can drown in it, but it's not a toxic substance. Well, it is at a point, right? Everything has a point where it becomes toxic. And gratitude is the same, right? Gratitude has a point where it becomes toxic. Positivity has a point where it becomes toxic. And that's talked about more now than it ever has been before, because there was this idea that if being ungrateful is a bad thing, let's be honest, being ungrateful is probably not a very healthy position to be in, right? Being ungrateful for everything in your life. It's like this entitlement thing.
Yeah.
So people tend to go, well, if that's not a good thing, then the exact opposite must be perfect.
Yeah.
That ain't how life works, right? The truth is always going to be in the middle somewhere. The best option is going to be in the middle somewhere. If we swing the pendulum too far the other way and go, well, be grateful for everything, or being unhappy all the time is a bad thing, so being happy all the time is a good thing. No, being happy is something that we would like more of in our lives, of course, but we also want to feel sad and we want to feel angry. And I see this stuff all the time where it's people are going, oh, anger is like a negative emotion. Anger is not a helpful emotion. Bloody is sometimes, right? Like anger, let's be honest, without anger, we probably wouldn't have had various leaps forward in terms of social justice and civil rights and stuff like that. Like people were angry about stuff, so they kicked up a fuss and stuff changed for the better. Anger is powerful, right? If it's channeled in the right way. There's not positive and negative emotions, and gratitude is great, like you said, to a point. There is nuance. The word nuance that you used there is one of my favorite words, because there is always nuance. And it's a funny one with the gratitude thing, and it's a funny one with the, would I choose, if I had the choice for that to have happened, would I choose that or not? There's nuance here for me.
Yeah.
I would, if you ask me, would you, if you could go back and change that, would you?
Yeah.
I wouldn't. If you said to me, would you want everyone to go through that? I'd say not a chance.
Yeah.
And the reason that there's a different answer for those two things is because I'm very happy with where I am in my life. I'm very happy with who I am as a person.
Yeah, me too.
I'm flawed just like anyone else. I have physical health conditions. I have mental health conditions that are challenging to live with. Some of these are as a result of burnout. Some of them are triggered by the burnout, and I've had kind of flare-ups of things. So fibromyalgia, for example, wasn't caused by the burnouts, but the burnouts have made it worse.
Yeah.
That's a challenge for me on a daily basis, but the pros outweigh the cons for me. However, when you're looking, that's the benefit of hindsight, right? 2020 hindsight. Whereas if it's about someone else, you don't know whether it's going to make their life better or worse. I would be too scared to go back and change something in case my life was worse as a result. I've seen enough
and I
time
think
travel
that's
movies
where we all get
to know
to,
that's
isn't it?
possible.
Yeah, and I think that's where we all get to, because I think, if somebody had said, would you change that? If I look at all of the things that have happened since then, there absolutely is that ripple effect, right? I wouldn't be where I am or who I am now if I changed.
We wouldn't be having this conversation.
No, we would absolutely wouldn't be having that conversation if that had happened. But yeah, if I could, if it was choice, absolutely not.
Yeah, if someone said, "Do you want to burn out again?" Despite knowing that I've had, like, I prefer where I am now to pre-burnout.
Yeah.
If someone said, "Oh, do you want a third go?" I'd be like, "No, you're right.
I'll skip that one. Thanks."
Yeah. I've done it twice. I did it once, and then I thought I wasn't sure if I liked it or not, so I'll do it again.
Yeah, just to check.
Just to check, just to be sure. Try anything twice, right? Might have been a fluke.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, this is still rubbish.
Yeah.
Don't need a third time lucky. Thank you very much.
But I think it's interesting for both of us that actually it seems to be that it was that second time that really started to drive the change. And again, I'm interested in what you kind of said in your introduction. Like, the first time that it happened to me, I went into like, I want to fix it mode, right? That was where I got really started geeking out on neuroscience and hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, understanding how the brain was working. I was asked to write a book on overcoming stress. I wrote that. I was looking at techniques for this and techniques for that and leadership and organization. Like, I went full into all of that, busy. What I hadn't done between Burnout 1 and Burnout 2, I'd started to do some of it, but I hadn't really done that really deep inner work. And it was like the second time round, it was like, right, if you don't do this, there's going to be a third on the horizon somewhere, right? You've got to now start to do some of that stuff. So I was quite interested that you were like, made the changes on the outside, but actually the real deep inner stuff didn't happen until like Burnout number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that we're conditioned in a lot of ways to look externally for answers, right?
Yeah.
It's just the way, society is. Whether it's a good or a bad thing is neither here nor there. It's very much just we look externally for answers because it's easier and because there's stuff that's available, and we go, okay. It's why we turn to drink and drugs and sex and shopping and all of the things which we do to kind of try and feel better. And try and avoid dealing with how we feel inside, because that's difficult, right? Humans are lazy, right? It's part of our nature. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think that we look for the path of least resistance. We look for the easy option. If we didn't do that, we would not have all the incredible inventions and advances that we've had over the years, because all inventions have come from someone going, oh God, there's got to be an easier way of doing this.
Easy way.
Yeah. But it's true, right? And so the kind of creativity of invention, and whether that's social invention or whether it's physical, like kind of objects and engineering and stuff like that, there's various kind of ideas around invention and stuff like that. But progress comes from people going, like, this has got to be easier, or it's got to be better, or I can't be asked with this. Think about plowing a field, right? Imagine doing that by hand, and then someone invents a plow that's still done by hand, but you're dragging it along, and then someone goes, why don't we get the horse to do it? Right, we'll get the horse to do it, and then like why don't we attach a bunch of plows together so that there's like a number of them being towed by the horse because the horse is strong enough to do it. All of this happened because someone was lazy, right? All of it. And so laziness, I think, even if it does exist, even that's contentious. Really good book called Laziness Does Not Exist, worth a read. If it does exist, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. So this is one of those tangents I told you.
I think I've got a follow up to that, because I get the lazy, and I'm all for now, like, ease and simplicity, right? If there is a different way of I want ease and simplicity all the way.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, and I suppose if I look at it from a business perspective, and also where we can kind of come from it from the overworking and the burnout and all of those sorts of things, do you think it's always laziness, or could you also say actually some of that has also come from greed? Because if I can have one person that can plow a field 10 times faster with 10 plows and I live surrounded by farmers' fields, right? And we, get mice infestation every time all of these fields are harvested. Yeah. And I know whenever more fields are coming up for sale around here, more of the farmers are then buying the fields. They get a bigger stake, right? Yeah. So, and some of that is cost of living and all of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, And I don't necessarily mean greed in a bad sense, but actually if I can do it 10 times quicker, which then gives me potentially more money, does that then mean that I want to keep plowing to get more money, but doing it in a lazy, like, do you know what I mean? Like in a lazy.
Yeah. I think it's the same thing.
Ultimately, that's where we've got to, right?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think the concept of laziness, it's all semantics. And I had the conversation with someone in some comments on LinkedIn yesterday evening and this morning about wordings. We were talking about moderation and balance and stuff like that, and how people use it as an excuse for the original premise was that people use the word moderation as an excuse to have bad habits, right? And bad habits in his terminology was to do with fitness. But bad habits are ones which don't serve you with your own goals. So a bad habit for me might be a good habit for someone else, right? It depends on what your goals are. It depends on context. But some people use moderation as an
excuse. Right, from a fitness perspective, everything in moderation, right?
Everything in moderation. But I love
a balanced life, right? That's what we get told.
Yeah, but I love the word moderation. I love the word balance and stuff like that. And so we were discussing the way that it's actually people's interpretation of the way they use the words. And it's the same with laziness and greed and stuff like that. It is a case of definitions and semantics which change over time. But I think that laziness and greed are essentially, well, they're either the same thing or they're very closely related, because laziness is wanting to get more by doing less, and greed is wanting to get more by doing less, really, isn't it? So they're combined, and we've got an inherent evolutionary need to be greedy and selfish because it's a survival thing. It's, our brains are still the same as they were 30,000 years ago, pretty much psychologically. We haven't developed much since then. Physically, we're the same as we have been for about 200,000 years. Society and our environment has changed a lot faster than we have. And so we've still got this need I need to be greedy because I have to survive. If I don't eat, if I don't get my stuff, I am going to die, and I'm not going to pass on my genetic information. It's all unconscious, of course. It's primal wiring, and so that kind of feeds that greed element. But there is also an evolutionary altruism where actually, if we cooperate and we work together, we will all survive and we will all do better. And I think that that's actually, although we don't see it as much because of the kind of end stage capitalism place that we're in at the moment, and that kind of maybe the greed bubbles up to the surface a bit more and we hear about it a lot. I think that most people actually are very collective in their way of thinking and their way of acting, and go, do you know what? I don't want to just be all in it for me. It feels good to help other people. The fact it feels good to help other people, that's an evolutionary thing. That's there for a reason. We've evolved to feel good when we help other people, because if we help other people, we all benefit.
Lead to burnout.
Hey?
Is that causing us to get to a point of burnout?
I think that it's burnout is such a tricky one. I really do think that burnout is it's a word that I use in the context of talking about my own story. It's not a word I always use in terms of my work, because again, people have different understandings of what it means.
Yeah.
If you use a World Health Organization definition of it, it's primarily, it's entirely down to, it's to do with work.
Stress, yeah. Workplace stress,
I don't believe that's the case. I don't think that we are work Jay and home Jay. We are under constant stress from all angles. I believe that burnout is a result of ongoing stress without adequate recovery. That's essentially what I believe it is. It's like overtraining from a physical perspective. If you, no matter how good you are at your sport, if you're Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time, and I don't know whether anyone will ever catch him. I believe that he still is anyway. When he trains, or when he trained in his prime, there was points where he trained for 1,000 days without a day off. And I had this conversation with someone. They were like, yeah, but he trained for 1,000 days without a day off. And I'm like, yeah, but how many hours a day did he train? Well, 2 or 3. Well, what did he do for the rest of the time? Recovery.
Rest. Yeah.
Yeah. He rested, he ate, he had massages, he slept in these like floating pod things. It's like his recovery was insanely, like, so much of a focus of his training. And it's like, if we use the analogy of going, well, people like the grind, the hustle, yes, you could work 1,000 days straight, but you'd have to work a little bit each day. Or you could, if you're going to work more each day, you have to work less days. we need recovery emotionally, psychologically, in the same ways we need it physically, because our body needs to rebuild after physical strain, and so does our mind. And
so if you look at this from a I suppose from your PT background, and then the stuff that you've kind of learned about the mental health thing, right? We're at the start of a new year. I think every single thing on my feed at the moment is about gym faces and, you know, people going to restart at the gym, which happens every new year, right? And some people, like, I love the training that I do. I also know that the training that I do can be counterproductive for me, because I still over push.
Yep.
I still overstretch myself. I'm monitoring heart rates and everything every time. Like, I want to be in the red zone, and my trainers are like, you've got to stay in the green or the amber. Like, I just want to, so, and I have to moderate. And for me, that's where the kind of real high impact stuff comes from, the yoga. And sometimes that might just be a dog walk, but I want to be doing something physical every day, right? We get told, and we experience it, right? The more of the kind of happy hormones, all of that sort of stuff that we could get from exercise, the more we want to keep pushing. And the more, certainly if you're, I suppose I'm going to say, like, maybe a bit of an addictive personality like me, I want to keep getting that feeling every single day, right? So if that means pushing myself harder and harder at the gym, you as my trainer might be saying, Kelly, you need a rest day. But I'm grappling for that. I want that feeling of feeling amazing, feeling energized, feeling like I've done something, all of
Who
that
doesn't?
kind of stuff. So when we then talk about the balance, and again, if we look at it from the work that we do, if we look at it, like, we know that we need rest. We absolutely know that we need rest. How can we then encourage, or at least point people in the right direction of choosing rest over choosing that constant need for, or constant want for, all of those things, whether it be the endorphins that you get from a really great workout, or the feeling that you get drinking a beer, or, you know, spending thousands of pounds shopping, or, you know, 60, 100-hour, 200-hour work weeks. From your perspective, with the trainer, the mental health stuff and everything that you know, how can we be encouraging more people to take the rest? Because we know ultimately it's the rest that's going to stop them getting to that point of burnout.
Yeah, it is, and it's a tough one, and I don't think there's a simple answer to this, and I wish there was. I think that it's such a complex. There's so many factors involved in this stuff, and there's so many dimensions to stress and overwhelm, which can then lead to it. And the other thing there is that sometimes we can face a big swell of stress and overwhelm due to one particular occurrence, like, you know, a bereavement, or a divorce, or being made redundant. You know, there's various things which can be this huge thing, and if our stress bucket's already like teetering near the top, you're immediately into overflow territory. And you can't plan for that stuff, really, other than by keeping enough spare capacity in that bucket. And there's three ways of doing that. One is to have less flowing into it in the first place by reducing the amount of stress. Sometimes you can kind of turn off some of the taps, right? Sometimes you can turn them down a little bit, but not all the taps are within your reach. Some of them are well outside your reach, and they're controlled by your boss, for example. But the ones you can reach, turn them off or turn them down where possible. Some of them you might need to turn back on at a later date, but for now, that one's going off. I can't face that at the moment. The second way is by using like kind of a pressure valve, let some of that water out of the bucket from a little tap at the bottom. And that's your kind of self-care, your daily rest, your daily kind of rituals, which allow some of that stress to dissipate, to allow that water level to come down. And the third way is by getting a bigger bucket, right? And that's what you get through going through adversity. Every time you go through some kind of physical challenge and then rest, your physical bucket gets bigger. Every time you go through a mental or emotional challenge and then recover afterwards, it gets bigger, because you're more able to cope with that if it happens again, right? You learn, you grow, you develop, you build strategies, you become more resilient. So that's the size of the bucket. And those three things mean that there's always going to be spare capacity for when, you know, something big happens, you can deal with it and gradually bail some of that water out again and come back to a resting point. That's the analogy I like to use. Now, in terms of how do you actually do that? And when you talk about rest, that's that pressure valve at the bottom. That's the bit where you allow that level to come down, the recovery, because it's not just rest. And I think this is a vital distinction to make. people think of recovery as rest, and it's not always the case. So if you're thinking about physical stuff, right? If you've got a really physically demanding job, you're talking about a kind of you live in an area with a lot of farming, despite the kind of automation that we have now, is still quite a physical job compared to, an office job. So your recovery from that needs to be physical rest. But if you've got an emotionally demanding job, or a psychologically demanding job, or a psychologically demanding life, you've got kids, you've got, pets, you've got relationships, there's all kinds of these psychological demands, but you're physically relatively inactive, then your recovery from that psychological strain could be physical activity, because that takes your head out of where that stressful place is.
Yeah, there's loads around the kind of 7 different types of rest, aren't there? Because again, I think what you say, and again, I have this conversation repeatedly with lots of different people. I do think we assume that rest just means doing nothing.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like
we need ensuring that we're getting the right kind of rest for what it is that we need.
Because if you come home from work and it's been a kind of a mentally stressful day, you just feel like lying on the sofa and just going, I just want to switch off. But you won't switch off because there's nothing distracting you from that.
Yeah.
And sometimes distraction is it's not a maladaptive tool for dealing with stress. Sometimes we need to be distracted. And I call, there's certain things I refer to as extreme mindfulness, right? Because mindfulness is a great tool for bringing yourself back into the moment, coming away from stress mentally, but it's very difficult to do if you like from a meditative sense. I'm not going to sit and meditate. Like, I can tell you that for a fact. It ain't going to happen. And I'm cool with that. If people want to keep telling me that I should be meditating, great. But it's not for everyone.
It took me a long time to get into, because
I've done it before. And I'm like,
all I was doing it was like going through my, all I was doing was going through my to-do list, and it was winding me up even more. And I was like,
exactly,
it's crap, right? Meditation's crap. But actually, because of the involvement that I have with yoga, and actually the importance that I see between mind-body connection, my thing is yoga, and also the sister science that goes with that, which is the Ayurvedic stuff. That for me is that's my go-to pot, right? I've got other things that I can do, but that is my go-to pot. But I completely get the meditation's not for me.
Nothing is for everyone. No one thing is for everyone. So when I talk about extreme mindfulness, it's like, go and do something which requires you to be in the moment. Otherwise, you're going to seriously injure yourself. So like an example of that could be horse riding, surfing, rock climbing, combat sports like martial arts or boxing. Because if you're thinking about how many emails you've got to reply to, someone's going to punch you in the face. Right? Extreme mindfulness, you are in the moment because you have to be. You are not thinking about your stress, and it is that as a recovery thing is incredibly powerful. Now, one of the things, this was kind of building up to answering your question, which was, okay, but how do we actually get people to recover? How do we actually get people to take this time? Now we understand what that time looks like. How do we do it? Okay, well, to use the kind of athlete analogy again, it's just part of their routine, right? They don't go, right, what have I got to do? Oh yeah, I've got to do recovery. It's like, that's their daily routine. So if you build habits into your daily routine which allow you that space to recover, you don't have to motivate yourself to do it. In the same way as you don't have to motivate yourself to brush your teeth. You don't have to motivate yourself to do X, Y, Z, because it's automatic. When it becomes part of your routine, it feels more weird not to do it than to do it. Now, that routine can be a daily routine. It could be a weekly routine, whatever. Some smaller things can be daily. And you build in these different pressure valves to allow that stress to come out. When you understand that kind of bucket analogy and you think, right, I know that I've got all these things flowing into that bucket, I need to let some of that out. Every day, I'm going to let a little bit out. And that little bit you're letting out of the bucket could be meditation. It could be a 5-minute walk. It could be cuddling your dog. It could be watching something on TV. It could be having a bath or a shower. It could not a bath for me, because again, I find baths stressful. Like I find meditation.
I love a long soak. With some aromatherapy oils. I love it.
Hot shower, love it. That is like proper.
I can't do it. See, I can't do a hot shower.
But this is so important, right? This is so important for people to understand that when people go, oh, just go and have a nice relaxing bath. I'm like, that doesn't exist. That those two words are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, whereas I would not do hot shower.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the thing that people need to do is to understand what works for them, because this is a very personal thing, and also when it works for them through the day, because some people's days, you know, when people go, oh, this is my daily routine, it's like, yeah, you haven't got kids, you haven't got a dog, you haven't got this, you haven't got that, and it's like, my routine is so different to that. And
yeah, so and that is a really important thing, I think, because again, and I think particularly at the time of year that we are having this conversation, right? Because for some people, they want to create new habits, they want to create changes for the new year. And all of your social feeds are telling you, do these 3 things, do these 5 things, do this at this time of day, do this at this time of day. And you know, what works for me may not work for you. I am absolutely an early riser. I can be up between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. You know, I struggle with the darker mornings because I want to be out with the dog at like 6 a.m. I kind of have to keep pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back. So it's like 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. So actually, it doesn't do me or her any good if we're walking in the dark. So waiting for a little bit of daylight actually really impacts me. Whereas actually, you know, I'm then not I used to be, but I'm not, you know, a late night person anymore. Like 9 o'clock, probably my absolute limit, and then I want to be kind of tucked up in bed. Whereas I know some people that don't start exercising in the evening until 8 o'clock at night. If I exercise of an evening, I'm not sleeping. I need to do my exercise first thing in the morning, and then that gives me the energy to get through the day. But there is not, and I'm so pleased that you kind of brought this up, there is no one size fits all approach to any of this stuff. No. And it is absolutely, as you said, about understanding what works for us. And some of that might be trial and error, right? If you continue trying to meditate and just more and more stressful, it's, you know, how long do you allow that to carry on for? Whereas actually, if your thing is extreme mindfulness and you're going to go rock climbing or kickboxing or boxing or whatever, right? If that's working for you, absolutely fine.
Yeah. And I think that the thing with that as well is obviously everyone's got different physical abilities as well, and certain things are going to be accessible to some people and not accessible to others. And it's about understanding what limitations are. We hear this, all the limitations are in your mind. No, some limitations are real, right? And understanding which ones are real, which ones aren't real, and going, okay, what do I enjoy? Because if we enjoy it, we're more likely to stick to it. There's all of these factors, and it'd be nice if there was a one size fits all. It would be so much simpler for everyone.
We just get given like an instruction book then when we were born.
Yeah, exactly. The brain manual.
Every day.
But I think that if we do this and we can build it into the routine and go, okay, where could I? And the other thing, you know, you've referenced this time of year a few times. The mistake I love resolutions, right? I'm one of the only people who isn't in the camp.
I don't.
The trendy camp of resolutions are for mugs. And I'm like, it's been going on for like 5 years plus. And I'm just like, get over it. Resolution literally means a decision to do something. A resolve, right? There's nothing wrong with resolutions.
But in terms of New Year's resolutions,
no. The issue is not New Year's resolutions. The issue is how people do it. And the issue is that people try and change everything all at once, and it's not sustainable. And we're being marketed to that this is the way to do it and stuff. The issue is that. The issue is not resolutions. The issue is not New Year's resolutions. The issue is how people go about it. And if we go, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change 2 or 3 habits this month. I'm just going to change a couple of things I do in the morning or a couple of things I do in the evening, and that's it. And then in February, I'm going to change a couple of other things, right? And my resolution is to change a couple of things a month. It's a great resolution, right? Nothing wrong with resolving to do something. Making a decision is important. And this time of year, I think, is a good time of year to do it for some people. Not for everyone, but it's a good time of year to do it for some people because you've had the Christmas holidays out of the way. The kids are back at school. Feels like a fresh start. Why not utilize that feeling of a fresh start? Why not harness that and actually do something, as long as it's something which serves you? And if you go, right, I'm going to change these couple of things, and I'm going to build in these pressure valves. I'm going to build in reading before I go to sleep because I miss reading. You know, you talked earlier on about getting back into roller skating and stuff like that. People miss things that they used to really enjoy. And it might not be, I'm going to go roller skating every day, but it's like, oh, on a Saturday morning, I'm going to go for a roller skate. But on a daily basis, for me, it's like, I really miss reading. So I'm going to read a little bit every evening at this time, after the kids go to bed, but before I put Netflix on. Find these little things which are pressure valves, which you know are going to give you some space away from the stress. And of course, like I said, turn the taps off if you can, turn the taps down if you can. Use your adversity physically and mentally to grow that resilience and grow that bigger bucket. But from a daily habits perspective, look at how you can relieve some of that stress. And if it's mental, emotional, psychological stress, look at not rest, but recovery. Look at things which bring you joy. Look at things which take you away from that stress and allow it to dissipate out of your body, whatever that looks like for you, and just change a couple of things. And once you make them habitual, once you make them automatic, which takes a bit of time, use your motivation to start, use your discipline to keep going. But the goal is that those behaviors become automatic, because motivation and discipline will not last forever. And once they become automatic, you've built a structure like an athlete has for their recovery. It's just a non-negotiable. It's just something you do. And that will serve you, because like we said earlier on, the burnout is the point at which it's that tipping point as a result of ongoing stress without adequate recovery. So if you build in the recovery, which you do have more control over than some of the other things, then you will you're essentially extending extending the time between now and when you burn out. And that could be to a point where if you get it into balance, where the amount of water coming into the bucket and the amount of water going out is in a pretty reasonable balance, you aren't going to burn out. Now, it's not possible to avoid it completely necessarily, because you might be hit by something unexpected, but you can increase your chances of not burning out by keeping that water level reasonable.
And ultimately, if we do that right, we can prevent it.
If
as we said, things happen, life happens, all of that kind of stuff, but we can, in that balance, prevent it.
Well, if there's the only way of preventing it is essentially stopping that bucket from overflowing. And if there's enough space in that bucket for a huge life event, like a bereavement or like a terminal diagnosis, which these things which people are like, oh my God, I have not got the capacity to cope with this. Some people, even if it's a horrible shock and it's stressful and it's upsetting, but they've got enough capacity that has filled the bucket right up, but it still hasn't overflowed, then they're not going to burn out. So it's about keeping that capacity. Like I said, the more spare space you've got, you can't turn off the taps. You can't have a stress-free life. Sorry, it's not going to happen.
No.
So it's about managing that and keeping that space free for when the shit hits the fan, basically.
And again, I think that's really an important point, because we can, and I think that sometimes you can look at other people and think, well, they've been through something the same as me, and yet it's impacted them in a different way. Some of that might be things that have happened to us previously, but ultimately that's about what we've got in our bucket at any one time, and how we react to those situations. So thank you. I could literally, like, this is fulfilling my inner geek, right? And I think you and I could probably talk all week about some of this stuff, but I'm going to say we're going to leave it there, because I've got my next guest in 11 minutes and I need to ensure I'm topping up my water and doing everything that I need to. But I want to say thank you. I think you and I definitely need to have a future conversation, because this is definitely fueling my inner geek moment. I'm like, I could talk forever. So Jay, if people want to find out more about you, where can they get in contact with you? And definitely book Jay as a speaker, right? If you are a leader of an organization that has got lots of arms folded people that are like, oh, I've heard all this crap before, get Jay in. Jay wants to speak to people that have got arms folded. So Jay, where can people get hold of you?
So the best place to kind of get hold of me, the best place to find me is LinkedIn. That's where I tend to hang out more than anything else. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, you can find me pretty easily. There's not many Jay Unwins on LinkedIn. Also, jayunwin.com is my website. So again, nice and easy to find. And there's some bits and pieces, some info on there. But LinkedIn's a good one because I'm updating it regularly. That's the most up-to-date little musings and thoughts and conversations that I've been having.
Connect with Jay or follow Jay on LinkedIn, or head over to jayunwin.com. Find all the details and book in to speak to your arm folders about health, wellness, all this mental resilience stuff and everything that we've been talking about today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.
I've loved talking to you. Thank you for booking a slot. Thank you for getting involved. And again, if you are watching this and you have found this helpful and want to share it, share. Hashtag this is burnout. And let's do everything that we can be doing this week to keep raising awareness of how we eliminate all of this burnout crap from our lives. Jay, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for watching. I will be back with you at 11 o'clock with Deborah Corey. See you soon.